Well, welcome. We're going to be getting back together here, and we're so excited that all of you are in this room together. As we have said, the best ideas come when we all are together and when we're as diverse as possible. My name is Teddy Potter. I'm a faculty in the School of Nursing, where I coordinate the Doctor of Nursing Practice in Health Innovation and Leadership. I also am Director of Inclusivity and Diversity. And as putting on my innovation hat, I am very much aware that the best innovation comes when you have diverse thoughts, diverse people, diverse thinkers, diverse ways of walking through the world, all in the same room exchanging ideas. And that's what we've tried to create today, and we're so glad you're here because we wouldn't have met that goal if you weren't here. So thank you very much. Our panel this morning, we're not going to rob them of their time because they're an amazing group of people, but we'll shorten our question and answer period by a little bit of time, and we'll be ending promptly at 11:45 so you don't miss the opportunities over lunch. So we have five panelists. We have Jennifer Gunn, who's from the Institute of Advanced Study, Scott Chazdon, who is from the University of Minnesota Extension, Joel Mixon from Humphrey School of Public Affairs, Dan Keefe from Computer Science and College of Science and Engineering, and Amy Schult from the Office of Institutional Research. We're going to hold the questions till after they're done and then open it to the group of people. So thank you. We'll start out with Jennifer.
Okay, we're going to be juggling computers part of the time here. Hi. Whoops. Hi, thanks. It's great to be here. And I'm really representing a sort of collaboration of people, one that started several years ago at the initiative of a number of social science faculty members, Karen Sue Tausig, Karen Ho, mostly from anthropology, Claudia Neuhauser, who then was the Associate Vice President President, for research. All these P's, I can't get them straight. And the Institute for Advanced Study, and DASH, the library's Digital Art Sciences and Humanities Initiative. And it was people who came together to say, we are living in this number-driven society. We understand that numbers are frequently used and various kinds of data as proxy for other things, and that written into those numbers are a lot of assumptions about human identity, behavior, etc. And then the way in which they get made invisible in the process of the data analysis and data-driven products has huge effects on people's lives. And so how do we bring the perspectives of the humanities and social sciences to ask questions about the impact of, about what is the human in the data, and then its impact on human beings? So Claudia Neuhauser, through the University of Minnesota Informatics Institute, funded 9 humanities grad students for summer to do research from a humanistic perspective related to questions around data and technology. And I just want to tell you about a couple of these projects because I think that they illustrate the wide ways in which people were thinking about and examining issues around data and where the human was in the data. And I should say, this year we shortened this to human in the data. It's a lot easier than where is the human in the data. So one of the first projects that is very easy to interpret and see is Alex Fink, who was in the, I think he's graduated now, but it was in the School of Social Work, and he was looking at how various kinds of social service mass data collection were being used as predictive data and to drive interventions excuse me, and to drive social intervention, sometimes public, sometimes private. And by this, I mean collecting data to try to predict who might end up being a juvenile delinquent, and having a proactive social service attempt to engage both the child and the parents in some kind of like parental education, in some intervention program for the student. If you think about it, the chutzpah is kind of amazing. You know, you're really sort of saying, we're looking at this various kinds of social economic data, not always individualized by any means, and then we are sort of proactively saying, oh, we think you're a future criminal, and we're going to intervene. Okay, I'm grossly oversimplifying here, but you can see that it was, what he was looking at is the way in which all sorts of kind of social service data, you know, whether you're on food stamps, you know, are you in Section 8 housing, your attendance records in school for individuals, how these data are used as a kind of form of surveillance for prediction. There was also, in a totally kind of different take on data, Madison Van Oort in sociology was looking at the use of data technologies employed in the fast fashion industry. And she was, what these technologies allow, essentially, is that just-in-time kind of scheduling, something all of us in the academy should be concerned about, because what it really means is people who are employed in these industries and never know from week to week what their schedule is, can't sign up for college classes. They can't improve their social mobility through education. It's a very, they can't find regular daycare for their children with the expectation that their schedule and the daycare schedule will align. So it really has, Madison's work looking at the ways in which these technologies, which literally are clocking people in, but much, much more sophisticated interactions on the work floor of these fast fashion stores like Zara and H&W and places like that, how they are really being used as a kind of surveillance technology that contributes to labor precarity and engenders certain kinds of labor resistance. The other part of this that it facilitates exploitative labor practices, but the other part of this that maybe it was in some ways a kind of unintended consequence that I found fascinating was that they can't use all the data that they generate. And if you read those things about Walmart, you know, clicking up 2 million data points per minute or something like that, you start thinking, yeah, who is actually using this data and how? So these are the kinds of questions, some of the kinds of questions that Where's the Human in the Data is asking. The grad students presented their work at a fall symposium where Ruha Benjamin, who's a professor of African American Studies at Princeton, was talking about her work on genetics and stem cells and genetic technologies, also forms of data. And we've had a series of programs over the last 2 years. We brought in Sorel Friedler, who looks at how algorithmic design encodes race, and again, is being used to drive predictive measures, but has a whole lot of unquestioned assumptions in it, and so it's being used in predicting recidivism and setting bail and prison sentencing. And the interesting part, thank you. And the interesting part about this is that that there are very few projects, data projects, which are largely proprietary, incorporate information that allow somebody like Sorrell, who is a computer scientist, to sort of reverse engineer their algorithms, because that isn't accessible. And so this prison recidivism and sentencing data, it was one of the few that she was able to use. And you'll see those kinds of, that particular example occur over and over again. We also, most recently this fall, had Amelia McNamara from St. Thomas, who works on spatial polygons, and she showed in very interesting ways how the construction of voting areas and the gerrymandering affects political outcomes. It was fascinating to me. It involved a lot of data visualization as well as information. And then in the spring, we're going to have a half-day symposium, and we're also bringing in Tawana Dillahunt, who is a computer scientist from Michigan who works on human-computer interaction, ubiquitous computing, and social computing. And her interest is how social science theory has been and can be used to design technologies that have a positive impact on individual behavior. The group of people involved is growing. There are more and more computer scientists involved. And I think that this trying to bring together the people doing the work with data, the people creating the algorithms, the people creating the hardware, as with the people who are thinking about these critical questions about the role of data in our data-driven society in inscribing inequality on our society is at the core of what we're doing. So please join us.
We're off to a great start with innovative and creative use of data. The next person is going to be Scott Chazdon.
And now for something completely different. So I come from University of Minnesota Extension, where I am an evaluator, and have given talks like this, and usually take longer to do that, but I'm going to try to compact into 10 minutes an overview of this evaluation method called ripple effects mapping, which I think is interesting when thinking about this intersection of data, diversity, and innovation, with the title of this session. So in Extension, we have a lot of community leadership programs, especially in rural Minnesota. And one of the struggles has been how to evaluate these kind of efforts where, yeah, we care about the leadership skills of individuals, but we care more about what they do with those skills in their communities. And so this method evolved as a strategy to evaluate community leadership and has become much bigger. Basically, it's a participatory method for conducting impact evaluation that engages both program participants and community stakeholders to retrospectively and visually map the chain of effects resulting from a program or collaboration. So when I'm talking about community stakeholders and program participants, this is a very interesting way to engage a broader set of people in discussions about whether some intervention worked. And not only to engage them in that conversation, but to engage them in a way that's deeply respectful of everyone in the room and allows for creation of an energy that furthers the work that people have started. So the purpose of ripple effects mapping is to better understand the intended and unintended results of a program. And often I'll talk about that in a second, some of those unintended results can be very powerful. We've used ripple mapping initially just as this summative evaluation tool, but increasingly it's being used mid-program as a developmental tool so people can gauge the progress made, come up with ideas for where they want to go, and then revisit the work they're doing. So it can actually be part of an actual intervention, not just evaluation from the side. It's never intended to be the only evaluation method used. Usually it's combined with surveys and other more traditional methods to get at specific outcomes of a program. And I mentioned this unintended consequences idea, and really that's a lot about relationships and social capital. People, I love this quote, change flows along the lines of relationship. So when you bring people together in a purposeful manner, things happen. And mapping out how those things happen is a super important thing to do when trying to evaluate a program. So we have, through the wonderful University of Minnesota libraries, published an online digital monograph about ripple mapping, which is available for free. You just got to Google it. And we have, in one chapter, identified the core ingredients of ripple mapping, and these are the 4. And you're going to hear more about appreciative inquiry in a moment. But that is the first one, where we engage pairs of participants in interviews with each other. And they are listening and writing down what they're hearing. And the questions that they're using for the interviews are based in appreciative inquiry. It's a very participatory approach. You've got, as I mentioned, this group of close-in participants in a program, as well as people from the broader community surrounding the program. And it's very interactive, both in those paired, it only takes 2 to make a group, right? I'm a sociologist. So it takes, you have this paired interaction, and then you have the larger group interaction also. And you use mind mapping software to actually document live everything that's being said. When I talk about participatory evaluation, there's some really good literature in the evaluation about how to do this, and I love this particular graphic, which you probably can't see very well, but it talks about 3 dimensions, who's in control of decision making around the evaluation, and the fact that that can be the evaluator or that can be deeply shared. The depth of participation can be really minimal, where you're just asking people for their data, or you can engage people in broader discussions. And the diversity among stakeholders can be minimal, where you're just focusing on your participants, or you can go bigger and think about a broader range of people surrounding a program. We use the mind mapping process. We use software live during this 2-hour session to capture the chain of effects that come from an intervention. And this is basically taking this mind mapping software and using it for evaluation. It's been used for all these other purposes historically, and now it's a cool way to use it for evaluation. The way it works is, first you have to discuss what it is you're evaluating and figure that out. The reason that's important is because what the evaluator thinks is the topic of evaluation is not always the same as what the community thinks, right? For example, and I have handouts of one case study. I only made a dozen. I didn't know how many people would be here today, but this is all in the book. When we did ripple mapping of community gardening efforts in Frogtown in St. Paul, the idea was to focus on the master gardeners from Extension and what they've done in the community. But guess what? When you sit down with people from the community, they say, well, the master gardeners have only been doing stuff in our neighborhoods for a few years. This goes back further. There's other universities involved. And we want the focus to be on community gardening in Frogtown. So that's what I mean by defining the intervention in an engaged way. Then you schedule your 2-hour session. And it's basically like wedding planning, except no band. You want to feed people. That's a very important part of the process. You invite people. You have to sometimes spend some time explaining why this is important. And sometimes you have to think about things like childcare and transportation. You hold your 2-hour group session, and that's the beginning. You get a rough draft of this cool mind map, and then you do some follow-up and cleaning. There's people who couldn't be there who you want to interview and get their information on there. And so there's a whole follow-up process. And so I need to go quickly here because I only had 10 minutes. But I do want to mention a couple of important highlights that you're inviting. It's useful for interventions that are highly engaged. And there's a lot of those at this university. So this is a very useful method for documenting the impact of those methods. And you're inviting both the close-in and the further-out stakeholders in the intervention to come to this session, and you're shooting for a group of 12 to 20 people in the room, which means you may have to invite twice that many. And you have two moderators, one who's a stand-up overall moderator and one who's madly typing onto this mind map. These are some examples of appreciative inquiry questions that we use. What is a highlight, achievement, or success from your participation in the program? What new or deepened connections with others have you made, and what did those lead to? So people go crazy with these questions. There's always a lot of interesting stuff that comes up. And then you start this mind map just like this on a big screen, and you actually document everything when people report out from their interviews. And then you can generate themes after people report out. And then you can go deeper into particular themes by collecting deeper stories. I just wanted to share that they get super complex. So this is a mind map from that community gardening work, which we did at 2 points in time. And all the black text was the first time we did the ripple mapping, and all the green text was when we went back and a year and a half later and found out all the new growth and new developments from the collaborations around community gardening. And this whole effort to put a lid over I-94 going through Frogtown and Rondo has roots in community gardening efforts in that neighborhood. It's very cool. You can't say it's total causality, but there are deep connections back to that work. So just to finalize, you can also dump the data out if you want to be nerdy and code it in Excel. And you can code it in schemes like the community capitals, which we use a lot in extension, which is very interesting because it focuses on these different aspects of community life that you can think about. This is what a coding worksheet would look like, taking all the stuff that people reported and figuring out in a pair of researchers how you would count certain impacts. And then you can report it out in all sorts of interesting ways, like a table like this, or a graphic that shows narrative, stories, pictures from the intervention. And so to finish up, it's a very beneficial tool because it's a highly engaged approach to evaluation, and it really encourages people from a diverse points of view to come forward and talk. Everyone in the room gets heard and gets a chance to be reporting into this. And it's very much relies also on, it enhances people who are used to oral traditions as a way of participating in an evaluation effort. So I won't go into depth on the lessons learned, but I will mention to you that you can download the book and learn more about it. And if you're interested, come talk to me afterwards, because I do have 12 copies of the one chapter about the community gardening work. Thanks.
I hope you're as excited as I am. This is just so wonderful to hear this great work that's going on to expand the circle of who gets to participate in research and knowledge seeking here at the university. So our next speaker is Joel Mixon from the Humphrey School of Public Affairs.
All right, so here at the Humphrey School of Public Affairs, we have what we consider to be a very strong strategic plan around equity and inclusion in regards to the work that we do. And so one of the things that we needed to do after our initial iteration of that plan was to reevaluate and reassess what we've done and what we would look to do in the future. So one of the things that we ended up using was an appreciative inquiry to create new strategies and objectives and goals for our new iteration of that strategic plan. So in the spring and fall of 2017, we used 3 approaches to solicit information about equity and inclusion experiences at the Humphrey School, and from the perspectives of faculty, staff, students, and alum. So we had appreciative inquiries, we had focus groups, and we have a document review of the previous strategic plan. So the thing I'm going to focus on today is the appreciative inquiry process that we went through in terms of assessing and evaluating our plan. So there's really 4 different areas that we focus on in terms of appreciative inquiry. We looked at the best experiences that the participants had, contributions, core values that they believed that the Humphrey School exhibited, and then future wishes that they had around the work that we were doing at the Humphrey School. So the first question in this appreciative inquiry interview process that we set up was that we wanted the participants to share their best experience with something related to equity and inclusion at the Humphrey School. So they were able to come up with a lot of different experiences, a lot of different efforts, etc. So what came out of that question was we saw that there were people explaining events, efforts that we had completed at the Humphrey School, groups that they belonged to. A lot of our student groups were affinity-based groups, so they talked about that as their best experience. Some students and alum talked about the curriculum and how they engaged with faculty in the curriculum. And then a few students had talked about the climate and how they felt the climate was supportive and was a good experience for them around equity and inclusion related issues. The second question that we posed was, what is the most important thing that you offered or could offer to equity and inclusion efforts at the Humphrey School? So again, those that were alums were able to reflect back to us and let us know what they offered at the time that they were students or what they could offer in their current roles as alums, as well as faculty, staff, and students who are currently in the community at the Humphrey School. And from that, we found that the contributions around the effort and the engagement that we were doing in our community was ways in which they felt like they could contribute. A lot of alum talked about serving as a resource, being mentors, etc. Also, alum and faculty and staff talked about serving as examples and being models, so to speak, of those entities around equity and inclusion that we were striving to represent. And then there were a few situations where there were like other responses that didn't necessarily fit into some of our categories that we use for coding. The third question was, what are core factors related to equity and inclusion that give life to the Humphrey School? And this was a difficult question for some, because it was getting to the heart of if people understood why the Humphrey School existed, or if people understood the role of what policy is doing in terms of a global perspective or local and national and regional perspective. So with that, a lot of times they reverted back to the commitment that they felt that the Humphrey School had exhibited while they were students or while they're community members, and the efforts that we were presenting. Leadership for the Common Good is an example of something that is woven through a lot of our curriculum at the Humphrey School about being public servants and doing things for the good of the whole in terms of our society. A lot of instances that we came across was around the fact that we had our namesake, Humphrey, to live up to. And everything that he exhibited and everything that he was, that was something that we felt, and that was something that the community felt was present in efforts around equity and inclusion. And then optics really was specifically around photographs and pictures, and the fact that we have a forum that was a former museum that was dedicated to Hubert Humphrey and all of the work that he did. And there was constant reminders as they looked around and walked around our community that this is what we're about and this is what we're going to be doing in terms of equity and inclusion. And then the majority of categories in this particular area and the other didn't necessarily fit in one of these. So there was a wide variety of different spaces and places in which people said they felt like the core values of the Humphrey School were exhibited. And then the final question that we asked in these interviews were, if you had 3 wishes for Humphrey's future work with equity and inclusion, what would they be? And this, along with the best experiences, are the 2 that we really focused on in terms of looking at the changes that we were making in our new strategic plan. And with those 2, it helped us to solidify what were parts of our curriculum and what was part of our climate and clarity and engagement that was really important for us to exhibit and to create opportunities for communities to engage with that. So one of the main things that really came out of that question was more work, more deliberative work around recruitment and retention of faculty and staff of color, and recruitment and retention of students of color. They still wanted events to happen, and they enjoyed the events. They wanted to do some more provocative events and some more events that took a little bit more risk and challenge. There were some issues that came up in terms of the climate being a little bit better for new immigrants and for those that identify in different capacities that we had in the past. The curriculum always need work. They always need to work with the curriculum. Clarity around what the Humphrey School is doing. And this was very important for us when we looked at our new version of the strategic plan, because we added another capacity to that to include communications. So from the clarity and the engagement piece, we really felt like we needed to add a portion of our strategic plan that included intentionality around how we're communicating what we're doing and the effects of equity and inclusion at the Humphrey School. So this is kind of like the coding that we use in terms of, like, for example, this was a best experience. So this is how we were able to bring together some of the descriptive content around the interviews and then kind of put that into a general area, and then what specifically about that would fall under the collaboration in groups. So I'm just giving an example of how we coded the interview responses in these particular categories. For climate, we're talking about particular dialogue and inclusion, and faculty, for example, all faculty and staff are invited to all events, so that was more inclusive, but it helped with the climate of the Humphrey School. Another example is ongoing dialogue about diversity is valuable, so we constantly talk about diversity, we constantly talk about equity and inclusion, and so that adds to a more positive influence on the climate at the Humphrey School. Curriculum, for example, taking classes, for example, someone used taking classes with Dr. Myers, an event that was planned with a student beyond the 13th of mass incarceration. So Dr. Myers helped out with that. So specific faculty and the curriculum, and they were given these particular examples as to how they felt like it connected with their best experience. And then, of course, engaging in the work. Diversity training that we do. We have programs, recruitment, research, etc. So when we look at our strategic plan, we have specific areas of teaching and curriculum, climate, community service, research, recruitment and retention of students, and recruitment and retention of faculty and staff. And then this year, with the new iteration, we added communications. So with that, we ended up changing the notion of having an aspirational document to having an implementation strategy. So every 2 years, because our students are, most of our programs are 2-year programs, we're able to revisit this document and add new goals, new strategies based on who are members of our community, who new faculty and staff, et cetera. So this is just an example of how we utilize appreciative inquiry in helping change the nature of our diversity strategic plan. Thank you.
Great best practices here, and especially one that starts with what's right versus what's wrong.
Yes.
Lovely. The next speaker is Dan Keefe from the Computer Science and the College of Science and Engineering.
Bear with us for a minute. We're going to swap computers and hopefully not break either one.
Great, you go that way. Woo, baby, sorry.
Breaking our ears, maybe.
Okay. That's good. Whoops.
There you go.
Great. Okay. Hey, thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. Yes, I'm a professor of computer science, and my research is all about data visualization and virtual reality. So I thought I'd tell you a little bit about my story. So it's interesting. I actually got interested in computing in many ways through art. So I'm also an artist. I do oil painting and traditional art like that. But then I learned that I could make pictures and be creative with computers in ways that I couldn't do with any other medium. So my master's work and PhD were on a system for virtual sculpture. It's like painting in the air with zero gravity in virtual reality. Really fun. My work now sort of continues this theme. So much of what I'm interested in is how can we draw upon artistic traditions, visual traditions, sometimes even multimedia traditions, so getting into sound and things like that, and work with people who are experts in this. So work with visual artists who know how to convey information through visual means, but typically to make sense of data. So here is a system that artists can sketch data visualizations on top of a data canvas of 1 terabyte of climate data. So they are helping us figure out how to best depict this data in a way that scientists can then interpret through the visual channel. So in my work, at least, within computer science, there's actually quite a lot of diversity in terms of the data sets, the topics we work with. We work with scientists, we work with engineers, we work with doctors, we even work with scholars of ancient rhetoric to help them create a virtual reconstruction of the Pnyx and how people gave speeches there. So we have, and we work with artists, we have lots of involvement in terms of topics, lots of diversity in topics, and even approaches, as I said, building upon art. But there's lots of things that are not working in terms of diversity in computing. And so these are some of the things that have been on my mind. Much of it is in who is participating in designing and building computing technologies. Who are the actual students? Who are the actual faculty members? And what kind of diversity is there in that group? And even how do we teach STEM? When I look at the curriculum for someone who's graduating as a computer scientist and then going on to work in our large tech companies, what kind of background does that person have? And how much diversity in terms of the topics that they've studied through their time as an undergraduate, say? How much diversity is there in that? So one thing that I've been thinking about is that data visualization, as well as virtual reality, these offer a unique opportunity to look at this question, okay? And I think that the reason is because it's so visual. It's so visual that these forms of computing make data and make even computing much more approachable. There's ways to contribute to this as an artist, as someone who works with data. There's many entry points, okay? So I've been thinking about, can we use visualization and virtual reality to somehow address these problems? Like, how do we get more students interested in computing and change the students that are interested? How do we make the way we teach STEM more approachable? And then, I'm totally on the same page with Jennifer's talk earlier. It's like, where is the human in the data, right? There's so much work now in machine learning and these sort of like closed box systems for analyzing data. How do we bring more of the human element into that? And the people who are crafting these machine learning algorithms are computer scientists. So they need this kind of education. Okay, so one step that I've taken toward this was a total experiment. It was an honors seminar class that I taught a couple years ago. And I thought I would just show you a couple examples of student work from this course. So it was just 20 students because it was a seminar format, but these are undergrads. Many of them had never done any computer programming before. And they signed up for this class called Visualization and Virtual Reality for Social Justice. So we ended up with, I don't know, half a dozen projects that came out of the class, and I thought I'd just show you an example of student work for 3 of those projects. So the first one was done by a team of 3 students, and I think maybe 2 of them came from Milwaukee, so they were interested in Milwaukee. And this is a quick video of scrolling through a web page that they built. But I want to emphasize that actually this was not just building a web page. You'll see within this several data visualizations. In each of those, they programmed from scratch. Okay, so they learned this process of how to create data-driven visualizations through programming themselves. The other thing they did is, just look at the aesthetic as it scrolls through, and just pay attention to even the use of color, the white space, the way they've arranged the page. There's a lot of intentionality to the way these visuals are put together. And if you're really studying data visualization and drawing upon these artistic traditions, these are the things that you study. I think that one of the students here, I think one was a minor in computer science, but I think that the others were interested in pre-med and writing and social equity. It's impactful when you see these things visually, isn't it? So they were interested, right? And how do we take these numbers that you often see in a PDF and do a little more visual storytelling around it? Okay, I'm going to actually skip to the next one because I'm running out of time here. Okay, now this is a virtual reality program. So some of you, probably most people in the room, have never been in virtual reality. So I need to say that what happens here is you put a computer display on like glasses. Okay, and you feel like you are really in this environment. Okay, you would start sweating in this, and you really feel like you are this person. Okay, so let me play this. This was on the topic of sexual violence on campus. So another group of 3 students.
And there's a girl in the street. You can't see
Just
her
some
hand
excerpts
because
from
it's
this
tucked away in her pocket, clutching that bottle of pepper spray that her mother told her to keep with her always. Back to her apartment, she has 4 opportunities to be next. She does not want to be next. These lessons are the difference between safety and a lifetime of fear, because 13% of female rape victims will attempt suicide. 94% will have symptoms of post-traumatic stress, and 100% of female rape victims will never forget. Smile, sweetheart, you're prettier that way. Let me get your number. Wanna come back to my place? You're gorgeous, did you know that? Wanna bang? Come on, I'm a nice guy. This is what society has created. This was the first lesson the girl ever learned.
So the collaboration in this, I have to tell you, one of these students was a writer. She wrote and performed and recorded this spoken word piece, right? And then she partnered with 2 students. I think these 2 were actually computer science students. And they took that audio track and then put this experience together with it. So it enabled this actually collaboration across disciplines that was really interesting. A final group wanted the observers to actually participate in the visualization, so they prepared a postcard that looked like this. And when you came to see their visualization, they asked you, draw a bar chart on this to represent what you think the diversity is like in your home college at the university. And so they asked people to do that, and then they would show a visualization of how what you thought compared to the reality. Okay, and one of the neat things was that they actually hid that data in plain sight the whole time. So actually, around my slides today, you have been looking about the data on the diversity on these colleges, okay? So this was a small class. It was really like a test. I mean, what I'm so interested in now is how can we expand this? I'm not sure how to do that. Most of our classes in computer science now are like over 100 students. So how do you have this kind of intimate discussion in reading? My wife is a cultural and medical anthropologist, so I should have said at the beginning that when I taught this, I had like a mentor. And we had real social science readings and things like that. So I tried to really create the right environment for this, but that was definitely facilitated by having a small group. So how does this sort of thing scale up? The amazing thing, though, is that, you know, typically in computer science, we have about 17% women in the class, for example. Okay, if you change the topic and you put social justice in the title, like how I learned to program to make visual results, people would learn to program, right? And it's all about sort of changing the topic. So thanks very much.
Well, while we're trading out computers, I hope you feel as hopeful as I do that we have faculty that are concerned about equity, figuring out how to engage diverse students in diverse ways with diverse ways of knowing. And the sky's the limit. Clearly, you showed us that, Dan. So thank you so much for opening our minds to what's possible when data is not stale and done in the old traditional way. There's many, many possibilities for how we can tip our culture. We're back on. So our last speaker is Amy Schult from Institutional Analysis.
Hi.
Let's get you going.
That's the one. All right. It's always good to start with the right presentation. That helps. Thanks. Hi, so I'm Amy Schult with Institutional Analysis. I work for Enterprise Data Management Reporting, which is an aspect of institutional analysis and works closely with the Institutional Research Office. Ron mentioned my name several times as he was fielding the questions about the IR data. And so I want to talk a little bit today about when I look around this institution and I see presentations like this today of the amount of innovation and the questions that we ask at this institution. What I am particularly interested in my role is how can we make the data that we collect about ourselves understandable to the people who want to use it to ask a question in a new way. And so I'm going to talk a little bit today about that journey that we have been taking and what I've heard from the university data community and how we're starting to take steps to take a system approach to understanding the data that we have, especially around diversity data. So as I mentioned, I lead Enterprise Data Management Reporting, which our goal is to support university data users through governance, technology, and community. This has been going on for a while at the institution, but we're trying to find new ways to gather the sorts of questions in the different parts of the university to engage in the conversation. So when I go out and talk to people who use data at this university, I get the same sort of questions in a lot of different contexts. How do I get the data that I need? I don't know where it is or how to find it or how to get to it. And then once I do find it, how do I know I have the right data for the question I'm trying to ask, or do I understand the data that I'm trying to ask about it? And then finally, why don't my numbers match the one that Ron put up on the screen today? Like, I thought that I had that number, and now when you know, I see it on the institutional research website or like this, and how do, you know, one of the pieces that we really try to get to from this standpoint is to decrease the debate about the number and instead start to ask the different sort of questions, knowing we understand the decisions we've made along the way about the data we've collected and how we present it. And so this is it is a journey that I have learned a lot. I came to the University of Minnesota about 6 years ago, and every day that I work with this data, I feel like I am brand new to this institution. There are so many nuances and so many pieces that it's hard to feel like you really understand the information that you have. And so, like, how can we make this more understandable and more accessible for people as they're asking questions? So where we have started with this initiative is around common person attributes. So you are a person at this institution, whether you're a student, an employee, what that relationship looks like. And we wanted to start the conversation with ethnicity data, I can't talk today, sorry. Specifically because it has so many pieces that kind of get translated in different sorts of contexts and things like that. And so we wanted to start with that documentation of what data are we collecting and how do we understand it and what are the definitions of that. So you're gonna see a couple of things you saw earlier from Ron's presentation because I think that they help to explain kind of where we're going and the relationship between institutional research and the work that I'm doing. If I can go the right way. So when people go to the IR website and see this official enrollment number and it's race and ethnicity information, I hear a lot about people talking about the time and effort it goes to try to align to these numbers. Like I want to use this information. I know that this is what's reported from an institutional perspective, and I heard some of the questions today when Ron was talking. Well, how do we determine who is international? Is that citizenship status? Is it residency? Like, what are those decisions that have been made that go into just that one column on this entire table? And so a lot of that logic has been stored all the way back in our systems. And so it's hard to get to for people across the institution to understand what decisions were made at some point during that data translation, and how do you understand that it aligns with the assumptions that you're making of the data and what those numbers look like. And as a result of that, it's a lot of time that takes away from being able to ask those next questions and the innovation and all of those other pieces that can come next. So how do we decrease that time to know, oh, yep, this is what I am looking for, and now I can take this and now go on to the next question that I have to ask. Along the same lines as the time and the effort that goes into trying to align to those numbers is making the choice. I heard the gasp in the room when Ron explained this difference of multi versus not. And I can say that when I first started my journey of documenting the current state of ethnicity data at this university, it took me a long time to understand all the rules that were being applied to some of these sorts of things. And so what we're trying to do is to say, if we have a definition that separates from our U of M definition, from IPEDS, which is also different from EOAA, which is also, you can start to line up all of these external agencies that set slight nuances of the difference of what those look like. And so how can we start to get definitions out to all of you so that when you choose the U of M definition and that set of data, you understand the implications that are there of what that will be as a result of the numbers that you see. And of course, the prime example of this is the American Indian population. We hear a lot with Morris of people who identify with multiple ethnicities, and that number gets lost of the number of people who identify when you use the IPEDS calculation of multiple. And so that being aware of even just that choice is an important piece of the numbers and how we relate and how we reach out. And as Ron mentioned, at the same time that we have these sort of single row, we collect every ethnicity that an individual identifies as. We know, there's all of these different pieces and all of these different columns that we have available to us, but understanding kind of what those different choices are. So what the value that we see of this work is helping the community make decisions and make choices. So what's the definition for the different diversity data? And what diversity data is needed for those sorts of questions? And then finally, what's the logic that goes into the results? I'm not going to go into, due to time today, I'm not going to go into the details of just how nuanced it is, but what we're working on right now is actual definitions for every single different one that articulates the logic, not just this is the primary ethnicity of an individual or this is the IPEDS, but what it means when you say that you are using the IPEDS definition for an ethnicity or something like that. And so when we started with the current state of ethnicity, I just want to talk a little bit about this particular set of data that people at the university self-identify at various points and places. Admissions, employee applications, it can be changed through My U. So there's a lot of different points and that you can both identify and change that ethnicity along the way. But how it's reported gets into where we get into all of these different nuances. So we have external reporting requirements. Ron mentioned IPEDS. IPEDS goes across students and employees and has the nuance of both Hispanic being counted regardless of your multiple identification of ethnicities, as well as the multiple category that's posed problems for us internally as we talk about the information. EOAA has a similar set of rules except the international status. And then in contrast, we have internal reporting like the OIR official enrollment numbers, and we have some other, the longer I worked at this, the more places I found where we have created kind of a slightly different version and a calculation for that. So that's what we're currently documenting, is just to get to a point of understanding what we have. And I always like to say, it's not that there's a right and a wrong answer. It's understanding and being aware of all of the different parts that we have so that we can have the conversation from the same starting point. And so as I mentioned, really this work is about supporting the innovation of this institution. I am continually amazed by the questions and the interesting things that come out of conversations. And so we want to be able to provide a shared data understanding just as a starting point for all of those questions and ideas, and so that instead it isn't a fact that you can't get to it in the way that makes sense for you, but instead allows you to ask the next 6 questions and the 6 questions that are going to come after that as you are able to work with this data. And so as I mentioned, currently we're documenting the definitions and the logic behind it. I'm going all the way back to the PeopleSoft and the legacy data warehouse and to get all of that. And we're working to collect and share appropriate use cases. So in what circumstances does IPEDS work better or for a different reason than this sort of thing? And then sharing and applying that data understanding across the system. Because again, we need to make sure that it works for Morris and Crookston as well as the Twin Cities campus so that we can understand the data from a university perspective. So my last point I'm just going to plug, one of the ways we do this is we have a university data community. It's a message that you get once a month, but it provides you with definitions that we're currently working on, and we encourage you to participate in that conversation. Data initiatives that are happening, training for different tools. We've really tried to consolidate the messaging so that from an OIT and enterprise data management reporting perspective of data and analytics, we can help you know kind of what's going on across campuses. And so you can just email us at Edmer and we will add you to the list. So thank you very much.
And I'm going to ask our speakers to come up to sit in a panel, and I'll be starting you off with a question here. And then we'll open it up to the general group. And I do want to stress that we would love to have rich participation by those of you that are online. So please be sending in via the online connection any of the questions, and we're watching those. So thank you very much. So my question for all of you is, and for the audience too, is to understand that you do not have to do it all. You do not have to collect all the data, analyze all the data, create all the communities, make it all visual. That we have experts that we can link arms with and have a community that can drive us to higher and higher levels of equity, diversity, and inclusivity. So my question for all of you, because you are immensely innovative and you're on the leading edge of innovation, is what, as a community, was important for you to allow you to be creative and innovative? How did that spark start? And how can we support one another as we all hope to spark each other? So I'll start with you. Mm-hmm.
I'd say it started with a variety of people who had conversations with each other, and then at some point we organized a single conversation. And so it was a lot of one-on-one, and then you begin to hear who's interested, or people think about what somebody has said that strikes them as being relevant to the conversation, and then bringing everybody together.
Lovely, thank you. Dan?
I'm sitting here kind of debating how truthfully do I answer this question. I mean, there's a couple of really practical things. One is, like, I got tenure, you know, and I felt like I could teach a social justice class in computer science. And another is that we got a new president, you know, and I got pushed over the edge. And I think, and then my son's cafeteria worker was shot.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
and there are things that happen,
Yes.
and I sort of reflected on what kind of professor do I want to be, and how do I do that within the framework of being a professor in a college of science and engineering.
Thank you, lovely. Joel?
For us, it was around the notion of relationship building and communication amongst faculty to students, staff to alum, and by doing these interviews for the Appreciative Inquiry, the alumni were very appreciative of the fact that we wanted to have conversations with them about their experiences, and for us to do it in a way that was positive, and for us to do it in a way in which we were able to do it over coffee, and we were having conversations, and it was allowing us to connect with each other in ways that we hadn't connected before, and was more about that.
I think what I learned about ripple mapping from my boss, who went to a conference and came back and said to me, "This is right up your alley." And and I have to thank him for that. And then I have to say also that colleagues are very aware when they hear about something innovative that really fits and can enhance the work we do, they get very excited about it. And usually there aren't a huge amount of hurdles in their way.
I think the other piece to me is that I believe very much in the power of social networks, of how people connect to each other across an institution, and connecting the people to each other that have similar questions, so that you don't feel alone in looking and exploring something in a way that, you know, you kind of poking at it one way or another, but it really helps to find ways to connect people, especially at institutions as large as we are.
So some common themes that I hear is the importance of and the essentialness of relationships, across sector relationships, cross discipline, cross campus, et cetera. And then the understanding that as much as data can tell us what we've done in the past, a lot of you are using data to drive our best future forward. So with that in mind, are there some questions from the audience? Don't be shy. We know lunch is coming. Yeah.
I don't know that this is a question so much as an observation maybe you can all react to. So two things that I take from this. One is this definitions piece. I think we're still stuck with this sort of mindset that we have to live in a table that's static.
Yes.
So if you bring together data visualization, they're really pretty straightforward opportunities to actually enable people to pick the definition, understand what the definitions are, but then use those to explore data and know what they're doing because they've actually, you know, select those definitions. So I think that's one thing. The other thing, and this goes back to Jennifer's point, the more we provide data and make it accessible, then there's another piece that goes with it, which I think you were getting at, Jennifer, which is misuse of data. And so I think this is all great. Let's get more data out. Let's get more data. Let's make it more accessible. But then we also have to think about how are we going to actually educate people on what is an appropriate use and ways to interpret that, and what actually is going to start doing damage. So I just sort of throw out those two observations, and you can push back or whatever.
I'd like to ask the panel that. How do we ensure that we move the data use and data transparency forward into positive ways versus abuse?
Okay, I have the mic in my hand, I guess. I'm sure all of us could speak to this, but I mean, the immediate thought for me is, I mean, we have to educate, and I guess we're educators, so that works too, but you know, I think we need to teach this, and I just, I reflect on some of our courses in computer science where we're teaching the technical details of how to analyze data, right? The statistics of it, the algorithms to analyze things. And we're in a mode right now where like many of those algorithms work, like they have advanced to the point where technically they like succeed at the goals the designers set out to do, but then there's a question of like, well, when do you employ it? And what are the ethical concerns in that? And that's the part that I think we spend so much of our curriculum cramming in the technical details that we don't have our students taking courses from Jennifer.
So I think that's the most critical argument for interdisciplinarity. and it's absolutely true. We can train people with great technical skills who will not be able to put in larger context what are the implications of their work. And to Scott's point, another issue is about data that is collected for one purpose and used for another purpose. I think the issue of transparency is that data is not inherently transparent, and it's not just a matter of visualization, but it is about tracking down, as Amy was talking about, what are the decisions that were made along the way, what are the definitions, et cetera. And finally, I want to talk about what Scott said, because I think it's hugely important that we go into any project, we're researchers, we're academics, we go into any project or teaching with our sense of what is important, and that ability to talk to the community about what is success and what is important based on their perspective rather than our assumptions is absolutely critical.
And that loops us back to our first session, which is all about bringing diverse students and diverse researchers into the academy so diverse questions can also show up. Anybody else on that question? Okay. We've got a question from online. It's what kind of information is provided in the monthly communication from the EDMR mailing list?
Sure, yeah. It's a combination of things like training that we have in different data tools. We've been doing a lot of work around getting small groups of people together that are interested in similar things. So we call them small interest groups, and if you're interested in something, to come and meet with people who are interested in something similar to you. We also share the definitions that we're working on for feedback and an opportunity to kind of raise your hand and say, that's not how we use it at all in this college or this campus and things like that. So it's a combination of things. It's, like I said, just a little bit of an overview for people of what's happening from an enterprise perspective for data, for institutional data.
There's a question over here.
Hi, I wanted to ask about students involved in the work of especially of formative assessment, and I think there might be interesting answers. There's a group of students at the university who are working on an environmental justice major, and some of you may have come to their symposium that was earlier this fall. If not, I'm happy to connect you to them, but also look for Voices for Environmental Justice. They have a presence online. And I would like to help them think about formative assessment or other appreciative inquiry, some of these techniques as they want to build a program. And in addition, I do understand that students building an academic program has its own separate complexity.
I'm not sure who
I just took the mic to pass it down.
Okay. Scott, I think you're holding the, what would you say would be tips for students or even faculty who are trying to drive change? Is that a fair way of saying that, or trying to build, sort of flip it towards, is that okay? Do you have a tip for us?
I just think it's interesting because Extension doesn't have students. You know, we have graduate research assistants, and that's my main connection to students at the university. One is here. But I would love to find a way to use some of these insights about appreciative inquiry or about methods of engagement, listening, to really have those conversations. And maybe, I don't have any specific ideas about how to answer that question, though.
So Beth, it sounds like some of the question is too, is the students are coming to us ready to advance change, ready to be involved in transformative work. And how can we as faculty, staff, support those students going forward? What can we do? So, yeah, that'd be lovely.
Hi, my name's Lacey and I teach sociology on the Crookston campus, and I teach a research methods class, and so it's really applicable to this. But one thing that I've started doing is bringing students on board, like for the school climate survey, that if we're going to be surveying students, why not have students be part of that process? That I graduated college like 15 years ago, so how am I, as a, in my 30s, trying to understand what's going on in an 18-year-old's life? Why don't we bring students on board in that formation process, and then they can see that their work is attached to something meaningful, not just teach them about school climate. Specifically, my interest is in understanding sexual misconduct on our campus, but how do we get students to be part of that and then actively care? And so 5 students from a mixture of my online and on-campus classes are actually putting together this survey and learning the methods, but then also looking at the theory behind it of why should we care about this and how do we get students involved. And then you've got those 5 students that are then reaching out to their friends, asking questions, and what should we know about as an institution. And that's been really neat. One of the online students actually reached out and said, thank you for this. He's a graduating senior, and he said, this is the first time a faculty has asked me to be part of anything. And that really stood out to me, that I thought, quite honestly, nobody would want to research sexual misconduct because that's something we, try to ignore. But it was really neat. I actually had to turn students away and say, I can only manage 5 of you on this project. I've got other projects, but it was really neat to see them jump on this opportunity.
And thank you so much for including the student voice, because they will be driving our research questions, and they will be driving the better world we're trying to build. Rajata.
I have a question since we are all here. Thank you for fabulous presentations. But I'm curious about what each one of you thinks about this idea about connecting data and diversity and where it might go next in our institution, based on things that you've seen happening already, and then ideas that we absolutely must try in the future.
Maybe I'll just go, Jen, do you want to if you can each give us a word of wisdom before lunch, that'd be great.
I plan to be at the end of the row next time. Well, I think part of it is to really think about how we teach. And we really still silo questions of diversity. We joke in the history I'm a historian of medicine, we joke that we never want to teach a course with gender or women in the title because we will only get female students. And it doesn't even have to be women in the title. Gender will do the same thing. And I think that that the ways in which we consider questions of diversity in this siloed way is partly a reflection of our academic structure. And I think the opportunities to teach in cross-disciplinary ways, interdisciplinary ways, and to team teach is a part of our own education as a faculty, because it is that kind of sharing and changing our own siloed perspectives that will help our students with this. And I also think it speaks to Lacey's point exactly. We need to change a lot of the questions that we're asking so that the questions themselves are more inclusive and represent a wider range of perspectives. And I think the ways in which we work together are part of what does that.
That's great. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks. I guess 2 things. So one for me is also in the teaching, and who's taking those classes? How are we teaching data literacy? And what are the components that go into that education? When you have a master's in data science, but what does that mean? So re-examining that, I think, is really important. But then the other angle that to me is quite interesting as someone who does visualization is thinking about how we take better advantage of the data we do have and get that out to students. So, totally unrelated, but we've been working with the U.S. Forest Service, who has the same problem. They've got, PDFs of data on a government website, and they can't explain to the public what they do with that data, right? It's actually this amazing resource that goes into climate change estimates and things like this, but it's stuck in a PDF, and nobody can relate to it. And when you visualize it, when you find ways to get that to people in an engaging format, there's an ability to engage.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Joel?
I was going to say, in regards to why we're doing what we're doing is important, because if we're doing it to explain something, that's going to be more quantitative in nature. If we're doing something to understand something, it's going to be more qualitative in nature. And when we're asking for humans and asking for our community to engage with something, there needs to be some level of accountability that we're going to do something with that information. So.
Great, thank you. Scott?
I have to say my first thought went to, I'm an evaluator, right? And so one of the gurus is Michael Quinn Patton. And he's got this recent book about, basically, it's all around using effectiveness principles to evaluate our work. And thinking about equity and diversity, and what are the principles that you're trying to accomplish, and how do you bring equity and diversity into everything you're doing? And so we've been playing around with this, and thinking about sort of every framework we have, every approach we have, and how does that look through an equity lens? What I like ripple mapping because it looks pretty good through an equity lens. It's very much, it kind of works well, but a lot of the ways that I deliver information don't work. And a lot of the same issues with stuff in PDFs that no one understands or cares about. So it's just, we have to use these principles to think about everything we're doing, and that equity lens is there's a good set of stuff there to be thinking about.
Thank you. Amy?
I think too, there's the organizational barriers that we have to take down, but there's also the inherent barriers of the way we treat different types of data and how we can start to connect them in new ways that I think will provide us with maybe very different paths, but just taking down those barriers that I think we a lot of times don't even realize are there between the types of data.
Well, please join me in thanking our panel. And then Virajat is going to share a couple pieces of information about lunch.
Are you okay with still sitting there? Okay, thanks. So next we move into lunch break, but I'm also going to use this opportunity to tell you about what's coming after. So we start with lunch break now, and at 12:15 we have what we're calling the Dear Data postcard workshop, led by Michael Winikoff from the Science Communication Lab and writing interns Lauren Hawley and Maggie Peck. And that's just across the hall in room 303. So try it out. It's very interactive. It's actually based on Georgia Lupi's work, which Michael mentioned that Dan first pointed him to. So very interesting work. After that, we'll be going into breakout sessions, and those sessions are in 3 rooms. One, again, is room 303 across, and there we'll have, the focus will be on campus CERU data, both undergraduate and graduate, and also some work from on-campus climate with the multi-institutional study. So that's going on across the hall in 303. And down the hall in 325, we have a presentation from, again, Extension, Mary Marzak and Mary Marzak talking about planting the seeds of data, and then David Haynes from the program in health disparities research, and Tasula Hajiani from design talking about culturally enriched communities. So that's 325. And in room 326, we have Leanne Millen and Peter Radcliffe talking about the undergraduate education experience, data-informed interventions. Jabra Kawas talking about veteran services and data coming from that, the 2018 surveys. And then the APARC team, Peter, Ariana, and Diana talking about data on serving AAPI students. And that's in room 326. So that's what you have lined up. Please enjoy your lunch. It's beautifully arranged by Zamaya Catering, and it's a minority-owned business. So thank you.